Hey everybody, Young Grasshopper here. Welcome to the Cliffside Bunker in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And this is another video in my G40 tutorial series. I'm teaching you guys how to play Axis and Allies 1940 Global 2nd Edition. And in this episode we're going to cover Convoy Disruptions. Convoy Disruptions. Now this is something that a lot of new players will just ignore in their first few games, and that's fine. But eventually we want to play the game the way that it was meant to be played. We want players to be able to use all the rules in their arsenal to win the game. Let's take a look at the rule books and find out where this is. You're going to find it in page 22 of the Europe rule book and page 24 in the Pacific rule book. So I have a little demonstration here with some units. Now, convoy disruptions primarily deal with sea units and air units. Now, let's get this right out of the way. When talking about sea units, transports are not involved. They do not convoy. And bombers, strategic bombers, do not convoy. And you'll see why. Now, aircraft carriers do not convoy, but fighters and tactical bombers can. Now, obviously, fighters and tactical bombers need to be on the carrier in order to convoy. I'm going to leave that aircraft carrier right there. Now, the one thing that trips up all new players is when convoy disruptions happen. This is the thing that is confusing, and a lot of veteran players even forget to look for convoy disruptions. Now, in the rule book, it states that all players must look for and recognize when convoy disruptions can happen. Now, this is a bit of a conundrum, simply because if the person who is convoying forgets to do it and they move on, well, it's the responsibility of the player getting convoyed as much as it is the responsibility of the player doing the convoy disruptions to recognize. And that's why in our games, if we forget to do it, we always make sure that we conduct those convoys even if it's late in the round. But again, what we want to do is try and recognize where convoy disruptions can happen. I have here some pretty cool tokens from HBG that's going to help, but let's get into the mechanics of a convoy disruption. Now, we'll talk about when it happens, but when convoy disruptions do happen, a submarine in a convoy zone will get 2 dice, destroyers 1 dice, cruisers 1 dice, battleships 1 dice. Tactical bombers that are positioned on an aircraft carrier get 2 dice, and fighters that are positioned on an aircraft carrier get 2 dice as well. So we'll get back to this because it's later in the sequence. Now, as far as the timing goes, convoy disruptions happen at the end of a nation's turn in which they are about to be convoyed. So let's take a look here. A popular move turn 1 is Germany comes in here with a couple of submarines. And as the battle goes, let's say these boats are wiped out and one boat is wiped out. Therefore, you've got one German submarine sitting right there. Now, we recognize that this is, in fact, a convoy zone. Not all sea zones are convoy zones, of course. And on my printed map, they're printed in a white. They pop out nicely, but on your out-of-box board, maybe they're hard to see, hard to identify. Nevertheless, we have to work with what we've got. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a convoy marker right there after the battle. And basically, what's that doing? Just helping the whole table recognize that there is a possibility of a convoy disruption there when the timing is right. It does not happen on Germany's turn here. It does not happen at the end of Germany's turn. Basically, what the mechanic allows is that the enemy, which is the United Kingdom in this case, has an opportunity to first try and take out that boat before convoy disruptions happen. So when does it happen? Once a nation collects income, which is theoretically their last phase in their turn sequence, there's also convoy disruptions after they collect their income. Now, at that point, the UK looks around the board and tries to identify these markers and see if it applies to them. So in this case, the United Kingdom here sees that they could not, for whatever reason, get rid of that ship, or they chose not to. And this ship sitting here, an enemy warship, except for aircraft carriers, okay, an enemy warship sitting there in a convoy zone at the end of the United Kingdom's turn after they collect their income are now going to be convoyed. Now, the German player having one submarine there, if we take a look here, we see that a submarine gets 2 dice to convoy. Now, the reason why I've got all these dice here at a 3 is because that is the magic mark. That is the middle mark. Any roll 3 or less applies. Any roll 4 or higher is ignored. All right. So let's say this submarine rolls a 3 and a 2. You add those up, 5. Now the second part of convoy zones, even though they rolled a 5, they're going to look and see how many applies to the convoy zone. And in this case, Quebec and New Brunswick is 3. So even though they rolled 5, they only apply 3. And what happens now? Well, that 3 IPCs comes off the United Kingdom cash on hand, which they just collected. So they collect their income, then convoy disruptions, successful convoy disruptions, take away the cash on hand from the amount that they just collected. Now, in this case, when they roll a 3 and a 2, even though 5, they can only apply the amount total of the territories adjacent to the convoy zone itself, which in this case is 3. Now, if that submarine rolled a 1 and a 4, then the 4 or higher is ignored, and anything 3 or less is applied. Therefore, only 1 IPC is removed from the UK cash on hand. Let's look at another example. So here we have another popular convoy zone, popular in the sense that it could easily come into play in any given game. So we have here some British units in a sea zone, which is a convoy zone. They have an aircraft carrier, tactical bomber, a cruiser, and a destroyer and a transport. So because they finished their turn there, sitting there, they're going to place this convoy tab to just show the whole table that a convoy disruption is possible. Now, there's going to be all kinds of opportunities for the enemy to take out those ships. It's highly likely that this convoy will not happen. Now, later in games when maybe Italy and Germany don't have a lot of aircraft, or maybe they're not positioned and there's a big fleet there that can't really be taken either, then this kind of stuff is going to apply. But this is a particularly interesting dynamic because remember, convoy disruptions apply against enemy territories adjacent to the convoy zone. And in this case, we have 3 Italian territories adjacent and 2 German territories adjacent. Now, for whatever reason, if Italy is unable to destroy these units, or maybe just half the units, anything sitting there at the end of Italy's turn, remember, they collect their income, then look for convoy disruptions that affect them. So it never, on the turn of the nation doing the convoy zones, that's why the aircraft carrier is important here, because there's no movement happening for the UK on this convoy disruption. It's just whatever's sitting there. So Italy recognizes that they have enemy units in a sea zone, a convoy zone, adjacent to their territories, and now they're going to go ahead after they collect their income and they have cash on hand. They're going to now see how much those ships are going to disrupt them. So remember, aircraft carriers do not get a dice here. However, a destroyer gets 1 dice, a cruiser gets 1 dice. Now the tactical bomber gets 2 dice. Here, a destroyer 1 dice, a cruiser 1 dice, and a tactical bomber 2 dice. Therefore, for this convoy disruption, the United Kingdom are going to roll a total of 4 dice. Remember, the transport does not apply here. So the UK player rolls 4 dice, and as soon as they roll, they identify what is 3 or less. So anything 4 or higher, they're going to remove from the dice tray. Anything 3 or less is going to stay. And with those dice that stay, that are 3 or less, you're going to add up how many IPCs are going to be taken from Italy. It could be 1, 2, 3, could be as high as 12, right? If they roll 4 threes. Could also be nothing. They could roll all 4 or higher. Now, after you add up the dice that hit 3 or less, that's how many IPCs must be removed from Italy's cash on hand. Now, Germany is going to go next after the UK. And if the Germans are unable to get rid of these ships for whatever reason, at the end of their turn, when they collect their income phase, okay, let's just back up and see. We got 4, 7, and 8. So a total of 8, remember? So even if 4 threes are rolled to make it 12, only 8 IPCs are going to apply. 8 max. Because that is the total amount of the territories that can be convoyed. Now back to Germany, if they're unable to get rid of those ships and they collect their income, all 4 of these boats, all 3 of these units that can convoy, going to get 4 dice again, are going to now roll the same way to take money from Germany. This is a very unique convoy zone in which the same boats can convoy both Italy and Germany, because Germany has territories adjacent to the same convoy zone. Let's take a look here. That's worth 2. That's worth 2. So a total of 4. So even if the UK players roll 6, only 4 maximum come off. If they roll 1, only 1. If they roll 2, only 2. Now, it's quite possible that all 4 dice are 4 or higher, and then the Germans lose nothing. So that is essentially how convoys work. Remember, the thing that gets people confused the most is the timing of the convoy zones. Another popular convoy zone, take a look here, is Sea Zone 6, in which if the Japan player is moving all their ships down here and taking islands and moving around here, maybe they've stacked up Tokyo to protect it. However, if the Americans freely move a large fleet into 6, perhaps something that Japan just is not capable of taking out, and that large fleet stays in 6, then there's going to be a convoy disruption. And remember, aircrafts, submarines, they get a lot of dice. And because it's adjacent to 8, which is the Japan island, and 3, Korea, there's a possibility of removing up to 11 IPCs. Now, if you have a large fleet there with aircraft, subs, other ships, it's quite possible to reach that 11 mark by rolling. Now, other convoy zones in the Pacific include around these islands. For example, if Japan is not able to take this island for whatever reason, or Japan controls it and Anzac is not able to take that island for whatever reason, one submarine in this convoy zone here could possibly negate Japan from getting this 4 IPCs if they're sitting there. So Japan controls it with an infantry. They have a roundel there. They're going to collect 4 IPCs, and at the end of their turn, they do collect that 4 IPCs as part of their collect income phase. But now comes the convoy zones and the convoy disruptions, in which Anzac with a single ship, a single submarine, could roll lucky with 2 dice and remove that 4 IPCs that they just collected for, all without trying to take the island itself. So I'm not going to get into convoy strategies, because we really shouldn't be strategizing the convoy. It's not that big of a hurt to your enemy, and a lot of the times you find yourself waging war, taking out units, going after capitals, attacking ships, trying your best to just wage war, and then you find yourself in a situation where you're convoying. A lot of people don't really plan to convoy, and that's why convoy disruptions can't really be seen and remembered. Now, some strategies like here, for example, it's quite possible that Japan does have a strategy to come in here and get in there and convoy that money off Calcutta. That's a strategy in which you could get those units there to do that, and it helps. But there's only 3 IPCs to be taken here. But late in the game, when you're bombing and convoying, then the Calcutta income goes down, and that's going to matter. So now remember, in this case, Calcutta collects their income, takes a look, and sees that there is a convoy possibility here. And if they can't get rid of those ships for whatever reason, as soon as they collect their income, the enemy convoys them, finds out how much related to the amount max of the total territories adjacent, and they're going to take that money, put it back in the bank. It does not go to the enemy, it goes into the bank. So convoy disruptions can matter, but the fact that enemies will always have their complete turn to take out ships like this, will always have their turn sequence to take out this ship or anything else, it's highly unlikely that the same ships can convoy repeatedly. You know, unless the enemy just says, go ahead, try it. You know, Calcutta could sit here and say, yeah, they're sitting here, but I'm not going to buy a destroyer. I'm not going to waste money to try and get rid of those. I'm just going to take my chances. It's quite possible that all 4 dice in this case, 2 for the sub here, 2 for the sub here, so 4 dice total. It's quite possible that they just whiff and everything's a 4 or higher and Calcutta's safe. And that's another reason why we don't really try to strategize, because there is luck. You know, you plan and you plan and you build to get into popular convoy sea zones like this so that they're untouchable for the enemy to take out, and you end up just rolling a mess, not hitting anything, and it feels like a wasted gambit. But it is in the rule book, and we do need to be aware of these things. That's why we put these symbols up here like this and this. And remember, aircraft carriers do not get the dice, but in order to have the dice coming from the aircraft, they need to be on an aircraft carrier, just simply because, you know, in this case, Britain does not do any movement. The United Kingdom just sits there, and they're positioned and they wait. On the enemy's turn, they have the opportunity to take them out. On the enemy's turn, they're going to lose money, but the UK at this point can do nothing. They just, on their turn, position them there, and they just wait to see if there's any there to convoy at the right time. That's why the only way that tactical bomber can roll 2 dice is because it's on an aircraft carrier. You cannot scramble units into a sea zone to convoy. And the biggest reason is it's just not your turn. It's Italy's turn, becomes Germany's turn. It's not UK's turn They can't do anything other than just hope that there's something sitting there at the time of the convoy disruption. So I hope that helps, guys. I hope that you guys don't feel intimidated by this. It's actually not that difficult. The difficult part is just remembering, you know, so many times there'll be a submarine here and they may convoy this, but they forget this. I mean, once they identify the convoy zone being here, it's pretty easy to just see how much maximum that they can get. But also too, I mean, when there is a British fleet here, remember the transport does not apply. Transport does not apply. But when they're here, they're thinking, oh, okay, Malaya, Shanghai, oh, sorry, Shan State. But they forget that they can convoy Siam. Now, here's a couple of interesting things to be aware of. Say, for example, Italy moves down there. They take that territory, turn 1. Now, this French ship right here, right away, from the time Italy on their first turn comes in here and they take this, they're now up 1 IPC. And on their first turn, they collect their income, including that extra 1 IPC. Well, this French ship is guaranteed to be there because the French ship goes after Italy. Therefore, the ship is going to get 1 dice to try and take away 1 IPC. A lot of people forget that. Same thing up here when Germany spends units to come in and take out southern France. And now they control it and they go up 3 IPCs. So right away at turn 1, if they take southern France, even though the French ships are here right away to immediately convoy, this is a convoy zone, immediately convoy the 3 IPCs that Germany just took. A lot of people forget that as well. Alright guys, thanks. Hopefully that helps. And that is Convoy Disruptions in this episode. So take care. And thanks for liking. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for subscribing. Appreciate you guys. May all your rolls be ones. Take care. Have a good weekend.